Hey everyone, welcome back to Mediators International Show and podcast, where we talk about the law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. I am back, almost a year later, back with Joe Dillon. Joe has been on the show before, where he is the founder and creator of equitablemediation.com. And he helps people resolve the differences, make peace. And he's been doing mediations for years, and he has quite the story. So I encourage you to go back to lmipodcast.com and check out the last time he was here, where he joined us to talk about his own personal story and why he loves this work of resolving conflict so much. But now he's here to talk about a new book where he's taken all the years of experience and he's put it into a work of art that he's going to be sharing with the world, I believe in 2027.
Yep.
But Joe, welcome back to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Great to see you, Mac. Thanks again for having me. I'm glad I didn't screw up the first time around. So, good news on that part.
No. We always love to bring people back because things change and people only get better. And so it's exciting to hear that you are now an author. I'm not sure if you were an author before. Is this your second book or your first book?
No, just first book. And boy, oh boy, it has been not only a learning experience, but a labor of love. And we can talk a little bit about that because anyone who has ever tried to write a book before, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
Exactly. So first off, I'm going to share my screen and we'll start off with when you were back, it was episode 318, Don't Let Your Divorce Become a Disaster with Joe Dillon. That was June 2025. About a
Wow.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how time
Crazy.
flies. And
Yeah.
so I encourage folks to go watch that. But while I'm sharing this, can you just briefly share a little bit about yourself, just for the people who might not have watched this before or who don't know who you are?
Yeah, certainly. So I've been a conflict resolution professional for 30 years now. I worked previously, I'd worked in corporations doing negotiation, contract negotiation, things like that. And then for about the past 20 in private practice at Equitable Mediation, doing divorce mediation. So helping couples peacefully end their marriage without the involvement of attorneys if they so choose. And
Mhm.
that's really what brought me on this journey and along the way, I've also done everything from setting up a peer mediation program in a private high school to teaching kids at the Boys and Girls Club how to resolve conflict among themselves. And it's something, you and I have talked about before where we see conflict appears in everywhere, every form, on a street corner, in your kitchen table, between
Yeah.
countries. And my firm belief is that if people had the skills, if they knew there was an actual way to resolve conflict that works, it does, then we would all be better off. So I think you and I share that
Yes.
goal of just continuing to educate the public and say, folks, it doesn't have to be this way. So,
Yep. Exactly. That's why we do this. And so
yep.
you've been everywhere, it seems. You've been very busy as well online, huh?
Yeah. And I try to do that too because a lot of times when people have a conflict or they're concerned about something, that's usually the first place they turn. So our website, we like the Equitable Mediation website has had over 1 million visitors over the years, which is just insane because, I'm just a guy in an office in a spare room, and I always think of myself, well, geez, who wants to read what I have to say? And it turns out a fair amount of people do. So that's what kind of led me into where I am today. And that's about writing the book.
Yes. So let's talk about the book. And I'll scroll down back to it. So this is coming out in June 2027. That's the anticipated
Cool.
date.
Yep.
And it's titled You're Doing It Wrong, a professional negotiator's 7-step framework for married couples. So please, the floor is yours. Tell us about this book.
Yeah. So, as negotiation professionals, you and I, we love to read. We like the research, right? We'll read all the academic papers. We'll do all that stuff. And I've probably read more books on negotiation than I care to admit. And they tend to fall into really two broad categories. The first is the ones aimed at corporate negotiations. So the one that's like crush your enemy, dance on their bones, and steal their company in 5 easy steps, Like, and so when you think about a marriage, that's probably not a great approach. If you at least
Yeah.
if you want to stay married, of course. And then the other set kind of falls into what I might call the therapy speak book, where it's like, let's discuss our neural pathways and decide, what color our parachute is to help us ease conflict in our relationship. And you're like, that does not help me decide where we're going to dinner on Tuesday. It's
Mm.
all very fuzzy and warm and soft. And so when you think about marriages, yes, you want to have respectful communication. However, what I've noticed with people who show up in my office, and heck, even in my own marriage, is it's not constant arguments. It's two or three arguments that keep happening over and over and over in some form or another. They wear different hats, different clothes. They might have a fake mustache on them, but at the end of the day, it's the same argument. And it's because my belief is, as conflict resolution professionals, and these books in particular, have never taught married people how to actually resolve the conflict. They talk about respectful communication and sharing your feelings. Hey, I'm all for that. I'm not knocking it. But at the end of the day, what you really need is an answer. And that's what the book is really intended to do. It's really intended to give people a structured way to have the conversations that they have to have as a married couple and come to an actual conclusion. So that's why I put it together.
Awesome. And so I'm thinking that you have plenty of anecdotes and stories from, yeah, we were talking just off camera. In our line of work, we can't just tell people stories, personal stories,
Right.
right? However, you've probably come across a lot of patterns over the
Yeah,
years. And
exactly.
so tell us, how do you navigate that and how do you share so people can connect with real human beings?
Yeah. So the one pattern, I'm glad you brought that up. Talking about having the same argument just dressed up in different clothes. The one pattern that crops up, no matter what the argument is what I call I've decided. That's the pattern. If your spouse says to you, you never listen to me, it's probably a form of because I already made up my mind. Or I come in and announce I'm going away this weekend with my buddies. Wait, we never talked about this. All these arguments have one thing in common, and it's this I've decided pattern. Now,
Hmm.
they all take different flavors, and people come at them from different ways. But as you mentioned, people tend to fall into a couple of stereotypical buckets. And so
Yeah.
throughout the book, what I'm trying to do is I'm actually interviewing real couples who are brave enough to sit down with me,
Mm.
answer a lot of honest questions, hopefully not get themselves in an argument, and
Yeah.
really talk about their communication styles. And then along the way, I'm gently talking to them about, well, it sounds like here's something for you to work on. Here's a pattern that I've noticed between you, and this is what you've fallen into. And I really believe if, using those real people and telling their anonymized, of course, stories, but taking what they say word for word, you hear them when they talk and they look at each other and they're animated about it. It's actually really interesting because it's reinforcing the work that I've been putting together. And that's what's been rewarding. I've read all the studies. I've got research coming out the kazoo. I have a 15-page, bibliography in the back or whatever it is. But to have somebody sit down to their spouse and say, I'm really still mad at you because I didn't want to get a new shed. And then one day, the Home Depot truck just backed up and there was a bunch of guys in our backyard putting it together.
Yeah.
I've decided we need a new shed, right? And it can be something as getting a shed or a dog to quitting your job or buying a house or, moving to Guam or whatever it is. And that's what we want people to see, that you're not alone in this. Your marriage isn't broken. I'm a professional negotiator and my wife and I still fall into these traps. So
Yeah.
it's not abandon all hope ye who enter here, but it is, let's laugh at ourselves and not divorce over it, but rather say, oh my gosh, we are so cliche. Let's work on fixing this. And that's really what I'm trying to do with the book.
Yeah, well said. And I think for anybody out there who's been married for a couple years and then who decide, you know what, we're not working out, we're gonna throw in the towel. Because I've seen
Yeah.
that. I am a divorce lawyer. I've done divorces for people who have been married for less than 2 years. And
Right.
sometimes we're deciding is it an annulment or a divorce,
Right.
and I've told people this. I'm like, hey, you haven't really got tested yet. I mean, you haven't had your
Hmm.
7 year itch yet. And
Yep.
so definitely there's a thing to be said about, hey, consider that you may just be going through something that might not be justifying a divorce.
Yep.
But what do you think about that?
Absolutely. And you're not able to express what you need or what your
Mm,
issue is a lot of the times because we are very emotional people, right? We
yep.
are we are creatures of like on the attack. We want to prove our point. We need to dig in. We need to defend. And you and I know this, and a lot of people don't. And in my interviews, when I've been sharing things with folks, you should see their faces. They look at each other and they laugh and they smile and they're like, oh, wow. I would have never thought to I don't know. For example, asking questions that start with how. Yeah,
Mm,
right. An open-ended question. People are like, they know what an open-ended question they think is, but you never thought to ask your spouse, hey, how can we resolve this? Those words never came out of your mouth because you're too busy saying, I can't believe it. You went away with your friends last weekend. Why can't I go this weekend with my girlfriends to the spa? Da, da, da. You're so busy in the argument that you're forgetting that you want to resolve it. And as you shared, when I do, sometimes I see couples, and I've had my share of them where the day ends and I walk out of the office, and Cheryl, as because we're anonymous, right? We can't share specifics. She's like, "How was
yes.
your day?" And I'm like, "Confusing," and that's basically my way of saying, "Why are these people getting a divorce?" It's not my place to talk them out of it,
Yeah.
but there is a part of me that says, "Man, if you just had a couple more tools in your tool belt,
Yep.
you would realize the
Me too.
absurdity of this and how cliche your conversations are." And sometimes, honest admission, Mac, sometimes I have to work really hard not to giggle in a
Yeah.
mediation,
Because
right? Because you're going, oh my God, you can't make the face, right?
Yeah.
You're like, then you hang up and you're like, oh, thank God, I can't believe that. Right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the difficult thing is always when you realize what they're going through is stuff you've gone through yourself,
Hmm.
and you will never admit it publicly. But people are people.
Yeah.
So let's talk about power up. So
Yeah.
on your website, on the website that talks about the book, you
Hmm.
have 7 steps, every hard conversation, one framework. Can you talk to us a little bit about this power up framework? What is it, and how do you think about it?
Yeah. So when we think about conversations, they're pretty unruly, and relationships are also unruly. You've got feelings and you've got different, experiences as children. Perhaps somebody's been divorced, your jobs, whatever, all the things that swirl around us. Life is not structured. So, unfortunately, what I've noticed is a lot of us tend to get into conversations at the worst possible times. We approach them with no plan, and sometimes these can be significant things that we're trying to talk to our spouse about or convince them about. So I said, what is a way that I can communicate to people to improve, power up their conversations, and give them a structure that they can go back to? And as you and I know, we're not sitting there with a piece of paper going, ask them, help me understand.
Yeah.
It's just so ingrained in our programming that that's how we see the world. But to the people who are married and aren't professional negotiators, this is what I want them to start learning is that at first it's awkward, just like think back to your days. I remember it like it was yesterday. I'm sitting in a classroom at Harvard, program of negotiation. I've got, the two of the three guys who wrote Getting to Yes are teaching the class. And
Yeah.
I'm just like staring at these guys, right? You're just like hypnotized. And then the role plays come. And now, Fisher is standing over my shoulder, and you're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
please go away.
That's
And
funny.
that's how it can feel when you're in a relationship and you're like trying to run this program and try to do this thing. That's okay. That's what I'm trying to tell people is like, you don't have to memorize this. You don't have to be perfect. We laugh about it in the book. You have these steps. So I'm trying to give them an organized way to have difficult conversations, make them go better. And each one is a step so that if you look at it and you say, you know what? I'm really good at the first, at the P, letter P here, but I'm really terrible
Yeah.
at W. So let me focus on working on weighing their perspective because I never do that, right? So that's also the takeaway is that you don't have to be professional. You don't have to memorize this complex thing. It's just something that's in the background for you. So when you bump into a situation, you can run the program, and get yourself out of it.
Cool. Cool. So, of all the steps, is there one that most couples completely botch without realizing it?
Oh yeah, the first one, no question, which is prepare the connection, right? So, take this for example,
Hmm.
is think about it's a Saturday afternoon, your kitchen sink is leaking. You decide, okay, this is the day I'm finally going to get under there. You pull all the junk out from the cleaning products, you grab the wrench, you got the towel, you're on your back, bent up and underneath there trying to replace the faucet.
Hmm.
And your spouse walks in and says, "Hey, do you think we should get another dog?" And you're like,
Right now?
do you not see, as a guy, I'm not a big guy, but I'm not a little guy, and I'm craned under here, and I've got a pretty bad back, and I've got stuff dripping in my face, and you choose now to ask me, should we get another dog, or should we go to Hawaii on vacation, right? I mean, it's not, sure, I'm willing to consider it, but not right now. And because a
Mm.
lot of us, here's a common, you want to talk about patterns, okay? Here's a common pattern match I noticed in couples. You've got the top of mind thinker, that's, I got to blurt it out, got to get it off my chest right now. And then you've got the deep thinker who's
Yeah.
like, let me get back to you because I'm not sure if I want pepperoni or sausage on my pizza. Can I let you know tomorrow? And
Yeah.
meanwhile, your spouse is on the phone with the pizzeria going, I got to know this now. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it is that people fail to understand that you don't do that right, the conversation's over before it started because the other person's now angry you interrupted them, not in the headspace to listen to you, not in the space to say yes. And what happens? The person asking, you never listen to me. You never do what I ask. You never give me what I want. It's like because my head is up underneath a sink. Now I know I'm playing it for laughs, right? I'm exaggerating, but it works just the same as if your spouse is flipping through their phone and you just start talking to them, or they just walk in from work and you got the tie down or the jacket askew and you walk in and you hear them go, that's not a good time to say, hey, can I talk to you about something? So
Hmm.
that's what I call prepare the connection. That's the first step in the process. And to me, that's the one that most people miss.
Yes. And so they are prepare the connection,
Yep.
P. O, outline your request.
Hmm.
W, weigh their perspective.
Right.
E, express your why. R, reward with value.
Hmm.
U, use patience. And P, proceed accordingly. Which one of these would you say was the most difficult for you in your own marriage?
Well, you is use patience.
Mm,
And this is where you talk about programming. So when I grew up, as I may have shared this with you last time, my
mm,
parents, they had a dysfunctional communication pattern. They either screamed at each other. I'm talking where the
mm.
neighbors would come to our house and ask if everything was okay from three doors down, like really hot conversations or complete silence for months at a time. Now, I'm an only child. I watched this pattern. And so what I learned was silence means they're mad. Silence is bad because they're not talking to each other. And then there's that part of your brain as a kid where you're like, well, but when they're talking to each other, they're screaming at each other. So that's not really
Yeah,
better either. But at
yeah,
least they're talking. At least there's a shot they might figure this out. Whereas quiet means game's over. That's one for me that's really hard because I hate silence. To me, silence means someone's mad. And when I talk or when I ask for something, I have a really hard time not talking some more and some more. And also add to the mix what we do professionally and as a divorce mediator, here's a misconception, and you know this from your work probably too. A
yeah.
lot of people think when a couple comes to me, they're like on fire, like they're screaming and yelling at each other. And the fact is, they're really burnt out and quiet. And
Yeah.
now it's my job to pull things out of them. And that requires me to talk a lot. So between my upbringing and my job, I'm really, really not great at using patience.
Yes. Well, I tend to agree that when people come to you in the divorce phase, a lot of
Yeah.
times they've kind of given up, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
they divorce isn't really marriage therapy, even though sometimes it really feels like that.
Yeah.
Because at that point, they've usually already done therapy, and they'll say something like, "Oh, I wanted us to go to therapy. I tried, I begged, I pleaded, and they wouldn't go, and it didn't work." Or the therapist was on my side,
Right.
and and so I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed clinician. I
Me
find
neither.
myself
Yeah.
trying to give some advice, but I think by the time that they're at the divorce mediator's desk, it's basically, you know, done. But
Yeah.
this book is proactively trying to help, in a way, save marriages by
Yeah.
helping people communicate.
Absolutely. And that's what we notice, right? Is that so there's a concept that I have in there that I call about the marriage bank. And I think about it and I
Yes.
say, as you remember from our last time, I have an MBA in finance. So I'm an
Mhm.
unusual animal in the divorce mediation space. But I think of things in terms of numbers and balance sheets and budgets and things like that. And when I think about the marriage bank, I think about when you go through your life and you go through your relationship. Not that we're keeping score, but let's be honest, we are. Come on, let's be honest. You think about, well, gee, that's the third time this week I've taken the dog for a walk, and he or she hasn't done it all week. And it's not like it's really gonna end your marriage, but it is something you're tracking. And all those little things
Yeah.
start to add up. So you can either make deposits into your marriage bank or you can make withdrawals. And the withdrawals can be as simple as somebody walks in, there's your jacket on the floor or trips over your briefcase or right, you don't think as the person who left the briefcase there any big deal, but the person who tripped over it thinks it's a big enough deal that they made a mental note, and all those things add up. And that's part of what I talk about in the book as well, is that every time you have a hard conversation and you keep trying, because that's, as we know, with divorce, people stopped trying. If you
Yeah.
just keep trying, you'll get there eventually. It's, you have to work past the frustration. Cheryl, my wife, and I, we have the same things where, we are good at communication, and we do get to a place where both of us look at each other and go, you know what? We're not getting anywhere right now. Let's just table this. Why let it ruin our day? Right? We know we need to resolve this. This is a big thing, but let's just go to the movies or go out and go swim in the pool or do whatever, and let's just get on with it, because we're obviously not going to fix it now. We're obviously not going to resolve it now. And if you have a framework that you can come back to, you also can kind of know where in the framework you were, so you can return to the conversation more easily, not just bring up the same argument over and over. So I hope that makes sense.
Yes. So, is there such a thing as two people agreeing with each other and yet still fighting about something?
Oh yeah, that's I talk about that in the book actually, and it's a term I coined which sounds really nonsensical, violent agreement.
Mm.
And people are like, "What do you mean by that?" And I actually, this is one of the times during negotiations and mediations where I do have to really prevent myself from laughing, not because it's funny, but because you look at two people and you're like, do you guys realize you're saying the same exact thing? You're just yelling it at each other, and you're using slightly different words or different language, but it's like we talk about with positional versus interest-based negotiation. You really have to get underneath what's happening here. And if you're so busy yelling at the other person, you don't have any capacity to process what they're saying and then suddenly understand that, they are giving me what I want, or they do agree with me. And that's a real trap a lot of us fall into, because we're so busy proving our point, and we're so programmed to believe that we're not going to get what we want, that when someone is giving it to us, I think there's a part of our brain that's like, wait a minute, that can't be, that's not possible. They said yes. I have to keep arguing some more, So,
Mm.
so that's what happens. And so if you stop and you stay quiet and you say, huh, and then the reframing, right? Like, if I'm hearing you correctly, you say I can buy season tickets for the Cubs. Yes,
Mm.
I said that 15 minutes ago. Right. And
Yeah.
you're like, oh, okay.
What's the worst negotiation mistake you see intelligent, otherwise reasonable people make in their marriages?
Wow, we see a lot of them. So, um, it's a toss up. I, I think, I think for me, it's probably when we talk about the power up and the steps, the weighing their perspective. Because when you come into a negotiation, so many of us have prepared what it is we want, what we're going to say. Sometimes, we even practice in front of the mirror, right? We've got our pitch all laid out. And you don't realize that the other person has zero reason to give you what you want, right? It's you who wants it. Why should they say yes? And when you come into them and you've got this whole pitch and this whole thing that you're saying to them, they're more likely to push back, right? To say no and to check off all the reasons why. And that's where the argument starts because now you feel like you have to defend your position and then they counter and back and forth. Going in, we don't prepare for what I think the big mistake is we don't prepare for what our spouse is going to say back. So if I
Mm.
went in, for example, and I said, listen, I want to buy a vacation home, in the south of France. Before you say anything, I know that you probably think it's a waste of money and time. I know it's expensive. I know I don't speak French, and I know it's a really long plane ride from California. So now I've kind of already countered all their objections, right? I've thrown them all on the table. So now they're still in listing mode, and that's a key. If I had said, I want to buy a house in the south of France, he'd be like, what are you, crazy? You don't speak
Yeah.
French. Da, 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 da. And then it would have gone off. But by doing the research and doing the homework and knowing what my spouse was going to object to and verbalizing it, now I can have a conversation. And I see that falls down all the time. People come in with their wants because think about when we were kids, and it's even worse, by the way, for me because I'm an only child. So
Yeah.
I got everything I wanted. I had no siblings to share with. Sharing? What's sharing? God, what? Right? So when we're kids, our parents are, everything revolves around us, and then suddenly you become an adult and you realize, like, wait a minute. I,
Yeah.
I wanted this. Why don't I have it? Why didn't someone give it to me? That's where I see that mistake. And by just doing that, you can you'll get into a negotiation, a real conversation, not an argument.
Cool. That's really good advice.
Yeah.
So, if a couple only takes one thing away from everything that we talked about today, what should it be?
Keep trying. Really, just keep trying. And it's like a lot of times people come in and say, "You don't understand me." And I understand you perfectly fine. It's that we all have different communication styles. We all have different, analytical styles. Some people are top of mind, some are thinkers. Some people like to talk about everything until it's resolved. Some people need to go away and think about it. All right? We're all different people, and you have to remember that you're unique. Your spouse is unique. We all come from different environments and we're different products. So it makes perfect sense that you wouldn't be able to effectively communicate. It just does. And people get mad at that. And I say, look, do the math on the how likely it is that you first of all found a person marry, right? That's check
Yeah.
number one. And then that you would spend the next 30, 40, 50, 70 years of your life not having a single disagreement. Come on, man, So
Yeah.
when you start thinking about it that way, you say, you know what? He's right. This is worth fighting for. Let's figure out how to do this in some kind of structured way. That's what I'm hoping to do with the book. And again, it's all about just trying, laughing at yourself, because Cheryl and I do the same thing. We laugh at the ridiculousness of some of our conversations, like because you get to a place where you're like, what are we fighting about? Right. And then it's a moment of connection and it's a moment where you can laugh. You're in it together. You're not laughing at the other person. You're sort of laughing at the situation. And that's really what I want people to think is that just keep trying. You'll get there eventually. You just have to, just don't give up. That's really the message.
Awesome. So the book is coming out June 2027, a couple years after we met,
Yeah.
and it's next year's going to be here before we know it. And so, in the meantime, what should people do in anticipation?
Yeah, so if you go to the website there, I have my own personal website, but if you want, there's another one for the book. It's called powerupmethod.com. And so you can do that, powerupmethod.com. And right there, there's a little, you can enter your email. We'll send you the first chapter when it comes out, and also send you some tidbits as we go, and probably start, asking people to do a little survey for me, because I'm starting to understand like people's different negotiation styles, and I'm trying to kind of wrap my brain around how people view themselves versus how they actually operate in the wild. Because for the couples I tell you, for the couples I have been interviewing, it's been really funny, Mac. They're like, oh yeah, we get along great. No, we don't really argument. Then about 40 minutes in, it's like, wait a minute, I never wanted to shed.
Yeah.
It's like, so you reveal a lot about yourself when you start asking these deep kinds of questions, and so that's a good way to kind of stay in touch as well.
Yes. Oh, really good stuff. I'm so thankful that you're writing this book. I think it's going to help a lot of people,
Yeah, thanks.
and I'm telling people these days, look, stay off social media in this regard. And that is, not everything is because the other person is a narcissist. Okay. Because you
Right.
keep hearing this all the
Exactly.
time. Everybody's problem is because the other person is a narcissist. I'm like,
Right.
look, it's complicated. It can be
Hmm.
simple, but it's complicated. We just don't have the tools, because at one
Yeah.
point you love each other. At one point,
Right.
you found this person appealing enough to want to, spend the rest of your life with them and have babies with them. But along the way, things break, but you can repair,
Hmm.
especially when you have the skills. And that's what you're
Right.
trying to get at. You're trying to help people
Yep.
be empowered with the skills that they need to help resolve their own conflicts, either while they're happening and hopefully preemptively, right? Before,
Yeah.
because you want people to kind of see, oh, wait a minute, we're going down this pattern again, this cycle. I can see it raising its ugly head again. We need to do things different this time. Let's pivot.
Hmm.
And so that's why I'm thankful that this book is going to be out there. So definitely want to have you back to talk about it once
Yeah.
it's out.
Great. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Mac. I really appreciate
Yes,
the kind words and encouragement.
absolutely. And so what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to email me direct. It's joe@powerupmethod.com. And I'd love to hear from people. I'd love to hear about, what they're working on, and what challenges they face, because I'm a person, I'm not a, PhD researcher. I'm just a guy who's seen thousands of people in these situations, and I like to hear from more people. I like to hear from regular everyday people saying, this happened to me. Here's something I ran into, and it does help, because it reinforces what I'm trying to share with people, and maybe I can help you resolve a conflict on your own end with your own relationship. So always happy to help like that.
Awesome. Oh, all right, everyone. Check this video out and all the other ones on lmipodcast.com and on the YouTube channel. And so we'll put a blog together, and on that post, we'll put all the links so people can have one spot where they can just visit your page and then check out all the different places. You have equitablemediation.com, you have powerupmethod.com,
Yep.
and the joedillon.com.
That's right. There's no other, Mac. Just the joedillon.com.
Awesome. All right, Joel. Thank you so much for coming on this show, man. I appreciate you.
Thank
All
you.
right, everyone, take
Bye.
care. Bye bye.